Hello everyone. Welcome to Microsoft Data and AI South Florida user group. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining from the internet. So welcome to our user group. And today we are going to have Padma here. She's going to talk about Azure SQL strategic advantages, driving business value with efficiency and security. So please welcome Padma, and I do not want to waste any more time. So I would like to welcome Padma. So Padma, please go ahead and talk a little bit about yourself, and you can go ahead and share your screen as well.
Yeah, thanks, Deepthi. I'll go ahead and share my screen so that everyone can see my slides. Let me know if my visible.
All right.
Is my sc-
I- let's give a minute of time here. No, we can't see your screen yet, but let's wait. Did you share
is
your
my screen
screen?
visible?
No, not yet. Did you share your entire screen? I think you can share your entire screen so that.
I did share.
All right.
Yeah,
I can't see yet.
I did share my entire screen
Yeah, yeah.
actually.
I can see now. Yes.
I did share
But
my
it should be a little bit bigger. Yeah.
yes. I'll expand it.
Yes, it's in
I will
the
expand it.
presentation. It's in the, can you share your slides in the,
Yes. You hear me?
yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, got it. So, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session. So today I will be talking about strategic advantages and driving business values with efficiency and protection. Um, and A quick introduction about me. I'm Padma Achanta. I'm a cloud data strategist where I have more than 10 years of experience as a database administrator, both on-prem and cloud. And also, besides SQL, I have also started my journey with Mongo. I do have experience in Mongo Atlas, IAC technologies like infrastructure as a code technologies like Ansible and Terraform. So I'm also a founder of the where I'll be sharing some interesting insights on trending technologies and some of the Asians. So without waiting, let's deep dive into the agenda. Today, I would be covering the agenda that deployment options, benefits of Azure SQL, deployment models. I'll show demo how to create Azure SQL database. We'll see some of the best practices for encryption. We'll look into role-based access control, and I'll give you some takeaways. So with that, let's look into the deployment options, right? So in Azure, we do have three deployment options. One is infrastructure as a service, which we call IaaS. The second is platform as a service, which we call PaaS. And the third is software as a service, which we call as SaaS. So under infrastructure as a service, Azure SQL VM comes under infrastructure of a service. Is that's like one of the examples. where under service you have Azure SQL database and you also have Azure SQL managed instance. That's like two other examples. And in software as a service, I would say Microsoft Teams is one of the best examples where all of us are using, right? So into each and every option which I mentioned just now. So let's start with infrastructure as a service, which is IaaS. So in infrastructure as a service, basic computing architecture like virtual machines, storage, networking will be provided by Microsoft Azure, whereas you have to manage your OS, apps, runtime, middleware, and also applications. If there are any patches like maintenance, if there are any patches, that is something which you have to take care, right? If you want to scale up or scale down any of the resources, it could be using it could be manual or it could be via script. I mean, you can't do it generally using dynamic scaling because IaaS doesn't support that. Also, if you are setting up a SQL server where you want to customize your apps and you want to take full control, then infrastructure as a service, IaaS is a best one to go with. So now let's go with what exactly PaaS means. So PaaS is nothing but platform as a service, right? So Azure provides you the platform as a service. Azure provides you all the features of infrastructure as a service. Plus, you Azure provides runtime, OS, and patching, where you are allowed to manage your application and also data. Like for here, if you want to scale up or scale down your resources like your CPU or memory, that happens dynamically. It's much control on that. And the one thing you have to keep a note that you have less control over the environment, where you focus more on your code and your application, and your building your application and also the data. It is definitely great for developers who really want to less worry about the infrastructure and concentrate or focus more on building apps and not just on infrastructure. So if you look, I would just look into some of the past benefits. Like in past, you can do the automated backups. You have your SQL, Azure SQL, for instance, it takes automatic backups, and you have built-in high availability, and also you can do the dynamic scaling, which I already covered about that, right? So Azure SQL database and Azure function apps, Azure managed instance, all these come under um, PaaS options. So under PaaS, so when I'm talking about managed instance, let's talk a little bit more about managed instance. So what exactly you think about managed instance? In my terms, managed instance, Azure managed instance is nothing but, I would say, it's an advanced version of SQL. So this is like in my terminology, okay? So why I call it as advanced version? If you see the table present here, you have like a lot of differences between Azure SQL database and Azure managed instance. The basic difference is with Azure managed instance, as the name indicates, you will get an experience of working at the instance level, whereas in Azure SQL database is scoped at the database level. So besides that, if you see the table, change data capture, common language runtime, cross database queries, cross database transactions, database mail, resource governor, SQL agent, all these options are not available as part of Azure SQL database, whereas these options are available in Azure managed instance. So one thing, automatic index tuning is available in SQL database, but not in Azure managed instance. So these are like some of the options and some of the differences with Azure managed instance. So as I mentioned, like you get experience of working at the instance level, and for with Azure managed instance, whereas working at the database level with Azure SQL database, you get a scope, a database level scope experience. So moving on to the next, let's talk a little bit about SaaS, that is software as a service, right? Software as a service is nothing but it's like it's a completely a cloud platform. So it's a completely cloud application hosted and managed by SQL Server. It's managed by Microsoft Azure, where users can access over internet and just connect. You just have need to have your internet connection, just connect to the application and use it, where you need not really worry about anything, right? So if you see the points here in software as a service, you have Azure provides you, Microsoft Azure provides you infrastructure as a service features, platform as a service features, and it also the application and data. You have nothing to manage. All you have to do is connect to that particular application and use it, right? Like for instance, Teams. We don't really worry about how the data in the teams are getting managed, how the files are being stored, whether the communication using that's a benefit of the SaaS. So I would give you a small example of from your deployment model, like infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and platform as a service with your real-time examples. When I was learning Azure for the first time, I related some of these examples to my learning, and that made my learning easier. So I would like to just provide the same to you guys. Okay. I'm seeing some messages coming up. So if you can give me a minute, let me go through those messages. Okay. I hope you guys hear me okay, see me okay. So infrastructure as a service is like renting a bare apartment. So what I mean by that is like you just rent a bare apartment, you install your appliances, you paint your wall, you get your you get your own things to live with it, right? So it's like just renting a bare apartment and you build everything upon it. Where platform as a service is like renting a furnished apartment. You get your own things and just live with it, where everything else is available. Software as a service is like, it's like you're staying in a hotel, you have everything ready, just make use of the service, that's all. So that's how I relate during my learning. I hope this example will help someone who is very new to Azure, just to relate the difference between IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So let's look into some of the benefits of Azure SQL. So I'm talking, my presentation is more of Azure SQL. So let's talk some of the benefits of Azure SQL. So Azure SQL is just with a few clicks, without much worrying about infrastructure, where your SQL database, your Azure SQL database is ready. We will see in some time how to create Azure SQL database. You just only pay for what you need. So what I mean by that is like in Azure SQL, you have an auto pause option where you can pause your database if the database is idle for some time. You can choose the time, which again I'll show you in some time. You can pause your database and save the price. And also, if you know that you are using your database for a longer time, like for 3 years, 4 years, then you can talk to Microsoft and get their savings on reservation. Those are reservation pricings for long-term savings. So that is something which you can do in that way. You can save some dollars, or you can save some budget based on the long-term reservations. Again, as I said, you need not maintain any physical hardware or maintenance, but and Microsoft takes care of everything in the back end, including storage, compute, and networking. So all you need not really worry about much about maintenance. So again, Azure handles patching. It does automatic tuning, which is like again one of the benefits. So Azure SQL provides you 99.99% of uptime SLA. So that's a real good SLA which Azure is providing by default, which anyone could consider, with automatic failover and also redundancy across zones and geo replication. If you opt with all those options, that's really beneficial based on your application. Um, Again, you have query tuning, which is powered by artificial intelligence AI. You have automatic indexing, intelligence caching, just to ensure the high performance is given to the customers, right? um, you can also scale up and scale down dynamically, and you can do that just in few minutes, right? So that's a very great option, unlike IaaS, where you have to do it manually or you have to go through via scripts. So with that, we'll move on to our next. If you see my screen, there are multiple ways where you can provision Azure SQL database. You can use Azure Portal, you can use Azure CLI, you can also use infrastructure as a code like Terraform, or you can use ARM templates. When I initially started working with Azure, I deployed or I provisioned objects. I provisioned Azure databases using Azure Portal. After that, I started using Terraform, and even Azure CLI I use very less. But whenever like you want to, whenever you use Azure CLI or Azure or Terraform infrastructure as code like Terraform, those features are much fast. If you are using code, it is much faster than using Azure Portal. So sometimes code is always faster. So just in case, if you're in starting stages of learning Azure, go with Portal and try to learn Azure CLI. And also, maybe if you're interested with other technologies like infrastructure as a code or Terraform in IAC. Now talk about a little bit about purchasing models. So in Azure, we have two purchasing models. One is DTU based, and the other is vCore based. So DTU based is nothing but database transaction unit, and vCore based is nothing but virtual core. So here, under each purchase model, you have multiple tiers. So under DTU, that is database transaction unit purchase model, you have basic, standard, and premium. Whereas under vCore purchasing model, you have general purpose, business critical, and hyperscale. So these tiers differs in terms of their performance, storage unit, availability features, and also cost flexibility. So let's deep dive into each of these options, and where you get an understanding for your environment what you have to use. Um, I'll talk about DTU based purchase model first, right? So, this model, as I mentioned, a DTU is nothing but a database transaction unit. It is a blended measure of CPU, memory, and IO. It's all like blended together, right? So, whenever you wanted to have more resources, like more CPU, more IO, you don't have the flexibility with DTO model that each individual resources can be expanded, whereas in DTO model you have to increase your number of DTUs, and then along with the number of DTUs, your CPU increases, your IO increases, your memory increases, and overall the performance increases. So you don't have the flexibility of choosing these horsepower individually, whereas you have, it's a blended, right? It's blended, and it's all called as database transaction unit. So here, as I mentioned, here we have like three tiers. One is basic, second is standard, and third is premium. In basic purchasing model, in basics purchase tier, the maximum storage you can go with is 2 gigabytes, whereas the maximum DTUs are 5 DTUs. A database default backup retention is 7 days, and Can be used for maybe like a basic dev environment where you wanted to test, where you want to learn something. So for that you can use it. And here you don't have high availability and the performance is very limited, so always keep that in mind. And when you go for standard service tier, where you have the maximum database size it supports is maximum storage size it supports is 1 terabyte, whereas the maximum number of DTU is 3000 DTUs and the backup retention is like 35 days. So most of the business apps which has a moderate usage, which don't have heavy loads, until which supports until like 1 terabyte, you can definitely go for like standard standard purchase model, right? Standard service tier. Where the third one is premium. So as the name indicates, in premium, it supports like this purchase model supports up to 4 terabyte of maximum storage, and this provides a DTU of 4000. So you can scale up to maximum of 4000 DTUs and 5 days. And any mission critical workloads, which needs like some maybe like some online analytical apps, or, or like some heavy workloads which needs to be up and running all the time 24 bar 7, applications mission critical workloads can go with this premium service tier. So just please make a note, this is as number of DTUs increases the cost is higher, and again you have no control over vCores. It is always important before you go with any purchase model, before you go with either DTU or vCore, it is always important that you have to determine your workload. You have to understand what's your workload. So how you can estimate, how you can calculate your workload, like in Microsoft documentation, Microsoft has provided a great documentation on how you can assess your workload. Make use of those documentation, make use of the formulas, and try to assess your workloads, and from there you will understand, okay, based on all the options which we discussed so far, you will understand, okay, I would like to, should I go with DTU purchase model, or should I go with weaker purchase model, which I'll be discussing in a minute. So under like DTU and vCore, which service tier you have to go for, so you get your understanding. So it's very important you understand your workload. And also scaling between DTUs, like if you want to increase your DTUs, then scaling between DTUs requires downtime, and also this could cause connection drops. So just keep that in mind. Okay, now let's talk about vCore based purchase model. So as vCore is nothing but it's a virtual core. Choose the exact number of vCores, memory, and storage you choose. You get to choose how much you want exactly, right? And this offers a great flexibility, great transparency, and if you have a requirement where you wanted to match your on-prem workload, then for that you can absolutely go with this vCore based purchase model. Again, in vCore based, again we have like three tiers. One is general purpose, second is business critical, and third is hyperscale. Let's go through these service tiers, these tiers. So the first one is general purpose, where here 1 gigabyte storage to 4 terabyte. He's allowed the minimum of 1 gigabyte and maximum of 4 terabyte, and vCores from minimum of 2 to maximum of 128 is allowed. And you have the backup retention up to 35 days. And if you want to have long-term retention, LTR stands for long-term recovery. If you want to have your backups to stay for longer time, this purchase model supports up to 10 years, so you have an option to save it for 10 years. So just in case you want for your compliance purposes, you can save it for 10 years. So balanced performance, and most workloads can go for this because it supports like 4 terabytes, and you have up to maximum 128 vcores. So with this purchase tier with general purpose, you have to understand that the storage is remote storage. So what I mean by that is, like, suppose you have your VM or service instance on Azure Premium. So they store on Azure Premium SSDs that live in Azure remote storage infrastructure. So your VM is present, but the storage is somewhere remote, right? So if even it's not physically inside your machine, so even if your VM is lost, that means even if you like your VM is corrupted or anything, yeah, the VM is lost, but your data survives. If the your data still survives even if the VM is deleted, or if the VM is unfortunately gone, um you know, so your data still survives. So that's one thing you should keep in mind. And the second one is business critical. In business critical, you have it supports from 1 gigabyte to 4 terabyte, whereas you have the cores from 2 to 128 v cores, but this supports from minimum 2 to maximum of 128 v cores. And the backup retention it up to 35 days at default, and again long term retention or long term recovery is allowed up to 10 years, right? Low latency apps or like financial systems can go for it because it again supports up till like 4 terabyte, right? For 128 vcores. This has a super fast SSD, and the storage cost is higher. Then this can store up to like 1 to 4 replicas. So just keep that in mind if you want to go with business critical. So your storage is physically present to the same host server running on your VM, and the data is lost if your VM is deleted, but you still have your replicas to recover your data. So that's how it's what this is super fast SSD. So you have less latency, right? And the third one is hyperscale. So under hyperscale, as the name indicates, it's like you have it supports the storage from 10 gigabytes to 128 terabyte, and it can support until like maximum vcores of again 2 to 128. I think like for all these vcores, for all these service tiers, it shows the same number of vcores and same number of backup retention, but how it stores internally and how it performs is what it differs mainly. Any rapid growing databases, any analytics, that can definitely go for the hyperscale. um, this I mean, again, based on your usage, based on like the number of vcores you're selecting, based on the your vcores, and based on your storage, your cost differs. So just always keep that in mind. And here I would like to say, if you wanted to use a single database, and and if suppose like under DTU based purchase model, if you're going for like 3000 DTUs or 3500 DTUs, just compare the cost and see if you can go with vcore, because vcore based purchase model may give you a better price than DTU. If you're using like 3000 DTUs or so, then vcore based purchase model gives you a better price. So conversion to vcore based purchase, conversion from DTU to vcore based purchase model requires no downtime. So that's one great benefit we have. And Azure SQL database instance only support vCore based model. So just managed instance. I mean, Azure SQL. If you're going with Azure SQL managed instance under PaaS service, it supports only vCore. It supports only vCore based purchase model, not the DTU based purchase model. So with that, I think we'll move into demo. Um, 10 seconds break. Um, I'll go into I'm going to Azure SQL portal. Um, I hope I see my screen. So this is homepage SQL. Type here Azure SQL. Okay, you just click on create. So you're on the Azure SQL portal screen. You click on the, and here you have Apple database, SQL management, and SQL virtual machine. So we will go into each and these options. One is the SQL database. So under resource type, you have single database. Under services, you have three kinds of resource types: single database, elastic, and database server. Let's talk about each one before we go ahead and create. So a single database, it's a standalone single database. It's a standalone SQL database with its own dedicated compute and storage resources. So that's nothing but your single database. It is best for your lightweight applications or microservices with which has some predictable usage. So this can scale independently, and each database is isolated. So single database generally in most of the environments, single databases are widely experienced. I use single databases. Here the billing is your database. So single database is as per your database. So if you have a web app which in the back it's a lightweight web app, and if you have only single, I mean, if this web app backend is just one single database, then you can absolutely go for the single database which is dedicated to the web app. If you want to go for single database, then you can absolutely go for it. So here the billing happens per database, whereas unlike that's for elastic pool, as the name indicates, it has a pool of resources. So its elastic pool is shared between multiple SQL databases, which has like varying and unpredictable workloads. So you have like multiple databases, and you don't know that when the traffic to the database goes up, when it goes down, or that not all the databases are busy at the same time. For those kind of scenarios, to save some cost, you can go with elastic pool. So in elastic pool, again, like here the billing happens as per the elastic pool, not for the database, because the elastic pool resources are being shared by multiple databases. So for instance, if you have like 50 databases and where not all busy at the same time, you can go with elastic pool. And the database server, so as the name indicates, it's just a server which hosts the database, which manages the database. It's like a container. It doesn't cost anything, just the server alone, without having database in it. It's like just creating a folder in OneDrive, and if you don't have any files in it, then that means you're not paying. That means it's not storing any data. It's like an empty container, and it won't cost anything too. So like the firewall rules, auditing, and managing server level settings, and all those information that comes under your database server, right? So even like whenever, if the beauty part with Azure is, even if you don't know at least the basic information of any of the options which you're using, for most of the time Azure tries to give you some information on the page itself. So if you click on show details, you have the information, features, capabilities. So just go through it and see if that fits your requirement. Now I'm clicking on create. I apologize, like today I'm not sure like why the pages are loading really slow. Azure subscription is like a billing container that groups together all your Azure resources like VMs, database, or storage, or any other resources which you create, and that tracks your usage or cost. So in generally in enterprise environment or in production or in companies, what you have is you have multiple subscriptions, and based on that, based on the subscription, the usage and the cost is calculated. So here I'm going with the default subscription. Mine is like a free account created, and the next one is um, resource group. So what exactly a resource group? A resource group is nothing but it's under a logical container that manage resources. So resources in Azure must be part of the resource group. So you have to have a resource group created if you don't have one already. So I have a resource group called test RG. RG stands for resource group. If you don't have the resource group, then click here and create new and give a name, maybe like test RG2, and click OK. It's that simple. And second is create database name, so like SQL DB in Azure. Just ensure that you follow the best practice. It should not contain match special patterns, or you should not have any reserved keywords. The length should be maximum of 128. So database name should not contain reserved keywords, and no database should exist with the same name. So just follow these best practices, and even if you're like even if you like miss this, not allow you to go and let you create until all these recommendations are met, all these check marks. This is my database name, and the next thing is the server. So when you want to create a server, if you have an existing server, which I already have one, it shows here. So I'm not going to select. If you already have an existing server, click on this drop down, it here. Now let's go ahead and create a new server. Server name I would give like just give any random server name, which again makes a best practice. Give Azure SQL server. Okay, this server is not available. So whenever you give the server name, comes with .database.windows to your SQL server. You have to connect using ASQL server -test1 .database.net. That's the full server name. The default US, because only that is allowed with my subscription. And you have if you have Windows authentication, you have SQL authentication, you have mixed mode. In the same way, here you have use Microsoft Entra only authentication. Entra only is nothing but Azure Active Directory, which recently they renamed as Entra ID. So use like Windows ID, or use mixed mode, which is both SQL and mixed Entra authentication, which is like a mixed mode in SQL on-prem, and authentication. Now for more purposes, I'm using SQL authentication. If you are using SQL authentication, ensure you remember. I gave okay. Process, I'm going with development, and even before want to use elastic pools. So, and compute and storage. So we talked a lot about it, right? So the compute and storage, click on the configure database. Options, you have provision, you have serverless, and here you have the maximum vCores, minimum vCores. You can expand as needed, and service tier rights, and mine is like a free subscription, so some of the service tiers are designed, but enterprise environment you have them enabled, so choose your service tier. I'll, for demo purpose, I will leave them default like that. And in the starting of our session, I mentioned like some of the benefits that is called auto pause. So this is where you select your auto pause option. So if you know to pause your SQL database after like few hours or few minutes of idle time, then you can save the cost by doing it auto pause. So here I'm just giving it, if there is like my database is pause my database automatically if like after 2 hours, if it is idle for 2 hours, and if there are no transactions for 2 hours, it's so that I save some time. You can select days, you can select hours, you can select the minimum is minutes, so you can use maximum minutes. Let's see how many maximum minutes we have here. So 60 minutes or like so many hours, so you can use. And data access, so I default it gave me 32. I don't want so much. Again, this is for demo purposes. I want to save some price the time. So I mean maximum is so with the default subscription you can use maximum of 1 month, the maximum of $200, whichever go first. So I just reduce price, I just reduce the data max size to like okay. And would like to make the base zone redundant, as this is like demo per zone at this moment, and we'll talk like what exactly zone redundant in a minute. I gave okay, and here you have like backup storage redundancy in time, restore, and you have long-term retention, right? So how you want your for your compliance purposes, for your application, and for the legacy, for saving of your data, for all for longer time, for audit purposes, for any of these things, if you want to save your backup for longer time, you have multiple options. You have locally redundant backup usage, you have zone redundant, you have geo redundant, and you have geo zone redundant. Let's talk about each of these and understand what exactly these options are. So the first one is locally redundant backup storage, which in generally we call as LRS. So this replicates data within your storage account to one or more Azure availability zones. So this is located in primary location. Okay, so it is, as its name indicates, it's local to your data center. The second one is zone redundant. So this means this replicates your data within your storage account into three or more Azure availability zones. This is like still local, but it is in three different availability zones, three different data centers. So availability zone is nothing but data center you have in three different data centers, still again located in your primary region. Geo-redundant backup storage is nothing but you have few copies, like three copies of your data in your primary region, and the same data and your same backup is asynchronously copied to your secondary region, which is like maybe hundreds and miles of away from your primary region. So you have one in prime, you have like three in your prime location, and you have a copy data synchronously copied in your secondary location. So the last one is Geo Zone Redundant Backup, which we call as GZRS. So here you have three copies of your data in three different data centers in the primary region, and the same is replicated again to your secondary region. When I was initially going through these options during my initial stages of Azure, when I was learning Azure, I got really confused with all these options. It took me a while to understand. I mean, though it sounded simple, but maybe during then a few years before, it took a while. So I related this particular backup option with real time example. So I'll tell you that example. It could sound funny for you guys, but at least if it reaches some of the audience to understand the difference, I'll be really happy. Imagine like is a data center is like a basket. Imagine you have like three eggs, right? If you have all your three eggs in one basket, that is one data center, that is your local redundant storage. If you have your three eggs in three different baskets, that means like each egg placed in one basket, that is each backup is saved in one data center, that is that is like zone redundant, that means still in the primary location but in three different data centers, right? So GRS, that is geo redundant, you have your three eggs in one basket in one primary location, and you have the same replicated in the secondary location. It is copied to a secondary location. So you have your backups here in one location, and you also have your eggs copied, um, eggs, I mean backups copied to a different location in one basket. So that is your geo redundant storage. Again, geozone redundant is you have like three eggs in three different baskets. That is, each basket has one egg in primary location, and in your secondary location, you have three eggs in one basket. So you have three copies here, and you have one more copy in your secondary location. That is geozone redundant. When I related example like this, it really helped me so much to understand. It's, I think, like most of us, when we visualize things, it's easier for us to understand, right? So that's how I relate. So I hope if it reaches some of you guys, I'll be really happy. So for demo purposes, I'm just leaving it as local and going next page, which is networking. For demo purposes, I give like public endpoint, so that it allows us to connect live environment. Just ensure that you're giving private endpoints, and the access is strict, and ensure like all the firewall rules are provided, every client type is, and ensure firewall rules are very strict. For demo purposes, I'm leaving it default, and minimum TLS version is 12.1.2, which is okay. um, So again, these options I'm leaving it as encryption, service level key, database level key. If your environment demands, just ensure like all these transparent data encryption key management is met, figure as needed. And for demo purposes, again, I'm leaving it as default. We're like almost 725, and go to additional settings. So if you want to use, if you don't want to use like this option, it gives you, if you want to create an empty database shell, or if you want to create a backup, if you already have a backup, and if you want to create a database from that backup, you can do that. Or you can also give, so if you have any backup, you can select, I don't have any backup available. And if you go with sample, gives you like Azure Work LT. It allows you to create database with the data with Adventure Works. So uh, just before clicking open, ensure that means that you by default Azure provides you, Microsoft provides tables and some data in it for you to play around, but ensure that your storage and compute options may change based on your selection, based on like the size of this AdventureWorks database size. Your options might change. Your compute and storage options might change. So for now, I'll go with sample database so that sample data to play around. Okay. And the next is tags. So I would say environment. So tags are nothing but it allows you to categorize things, and it's much readable. For instance, give the name as many as names you want, and gives the values which is not only you follow the standards of Azure, but some naming standards, follow some naming standards may which would tell by looking at the server if it's a test environment, you know, before even he gets the information. So try to follow such naming name, and if you want to provide the environment name, like for instance application name is like some people saw test environment, so try to give like those kind of keywords in your server and database name. So it's very understandable created this particular database, this particular server, but even after 3 to 4 years, if you look at the name, you understand, okay, this is for this environment, this application makes more sense. And now I just hit on, and it shows me the estimated cost. I have the estimated cost here. Its demo purpose, I selected everything very less. You have all your selections will be previewed last page, and hit on create. And creation, this particular SQL could take some time. So sometime I have already created a base, so I have available. Have our actual, I think it is validating while we have our Azure SQL test, and as we are doing Azure SQL database, this is giving a scope of database. So I think I have a question here from Ryan on managing the MI option is a full SQL with most of the options you want the on-site install. You mean to say on-site install is on-prem SQL Server? If that is the case, then yes, you will get instance level experience working on managed instance. Yes, you will have most of the options what you see on on-prem. And if you want to actually customize data like your on-prem, you can absolutely go with managed instance, if that answers your question. So because I have I think it's AdventureWorks, so this gave me labels, so I can use labels, and also Um, this is at the server. I think like for some reason, you can go to properties. You will see that the options and the default it goes with number 160. Latest and greatest features of all the SQL Server, the compatibility to a different option, to a lower compatibility to use a previous SQL Server versions, then yes, you can go. You can go with that. So okay, it's a little faster. Well, options, calculation, but this is like you want to change your collation while database itself. You have an option to change your have an option like change the option here when you hit, and you have to search your compatibility what you want to change to. This is case insensitive. If you want to change to case sensitive, yes, you can do that and just select that, and uh, that collation will appear here. So you have change tracking, just like how you have all the options like on-prem SQL database store, query store. So this is about creation of a SQL database, and also let's look into um, role-based access while we are on the same page. This is going really slow, guys. Options in Azure SQL, like if, if you want to give a contributor permissions, yes, you can give, but even with the contributor permissions, you can restrict. Anyhow, that will be encrypted. But if you want to restrict it, restrict even the number of tables, number of objects, absolutely you can do those things as well using R-based control. Um, comes to encryption. So regularly, always it is important to change your access keys or secrets to reduce the risk of complaints. In some companies, like they do key rotation for every quarter, and for some company for every half year. So it all depends on company policies and compliance. So just try to follow all the best practices, not only just in production but also non-production. In some organizations, even non-prod is treated as production because of all the development data created, it all developers hard work. So even development is sometimes treated as production. Even if development is down for some time, it's very like developers become very upset. So it's very important that we take care of them. So at the same time we take care of data. So even it's a non-production environment, try to encrypt, use the best practices and try to encrypt your data. Use built-in tools like data to detect threats, misconfigurations or suspicious activities. Like Azure is providing us a lot of built-in tools, so try to use them before going with any third-party tools. And ensure your data is encrypted not only just at rest but also it is maintained in transit as well. So just by making sure it is encrypted both at rest and also maintained in your transit, so that ensures your and integrity is always well maintained. Again, like try to store your secret certificates in Azure Key Vault. If you're using your like Azure, like try to use your Key Vault, it is very secured. And um, try not to use your secrets and secrets in their connection trees for testing purposes. Even try to avoid that. Try to use Key Vault, which is like one of the best tools to save your secrets. And use compliance tools for reporting. Azure has many reporting tools, so use those tools for reporting purposes. Um, I'm sorry guys, like I have to skip are showing you RBAC on screen because system is going really slow. But if you see my slide, you have the built-in roles like owner, contributor, reader and user access administrator. These are the built-in roles provided by Azure, and you can definitely you can customize your RBAC. So I can relate this. Like for instance, in on-prem, when you have your SQL server, and if you go to security, you have something called creation of a role. So you can create a role, you can tag your objects, and you can restrict the object level permissions in that role. So it is kind of similar, but you have more advanced options than what you have in on-prem. So that's more about RBAC. I would like to give some takeaways here. Let's discuss some of the interesting points. So now Azure is coming with Copilot, right? Microsoft is have Copilot provided in most of their tools. So if any one of you have no experience using Copilot, try to use it. It's a really cool feature, and even if your company is providing Copilot license, then try to use it. And whenever you use Copilot, you have like two options, especially if you're using within the company. You have work and you have web. If you're using work tab, then this gives you information related to your work. So if you don't know if you don't know about an application which is used within your company, you can ask like, hey, I want to understand what exactly this application does. Copilot give you an answers, because that is something within your organization environment. It gives you how that particular application is used within your company and exactly the application does. And you also have one more called web, which is like more of internet usage, outside your company usage. So you have two options, which I felt that's a real cool feature to know more about insights about the organization we are working for, if some of we have doubts. So that's one thing. So Azure SQL database is free with certain limits. So the limits are data up to, if you're using a database up to 35 gigabytes, and also if the maximum backup is up to 35 gigabytes, then yes, the offering is free. So like for instance, if you have like if you're using elastic pool, and if you have like if you're using a single database and the database size is like 25 or 28, yes, then that is absolutely free. And auto pause is enabled by default, because again this is a free offer, right? So it is enabled by default. And if you want to convert your existing database to your to this for, then that is something which is not possible. Azure is not providing that. And for students, this particular offer is not available, so it is not available for student subscription. So just keep these things in mind. And as I mentioned before, the default compatibility is 160, and again, you can lower the compatibility based on your needs, but 160 gives you the latest feature advantages. And elastic jobs, as I mentioned, like we don't have, if you see like our SQL server, if you see the SQL server, we don't have SQL agent. If you use elastic jobs, that is like just Azure SQL agent, so try to use elastic jobs. um, and Entra ID, which is formerly known as Azure SQL, Azure Active Directory. So try to use Entra IDs whenever you can. And also, we recently got Cloud IDs, right? I'm not sure if any of you are aware, which comes with -c. So for instance, I'm Padma Achanta, right? Padma dot Achanta -c at on Microsoft dot Microsoft at on Microsoft dot your company organization domain.com. So that's your cloud account, so that's even more secure. So just try to use all those best practices which Microsoft is providing by default, and try to for demo purposes we used SQL account, but try not to use too much of SQL account, because password can be because it's not a Active Directory authentication, it is like SQL authentication. So again, you have to give your password exclusively, so try not to use it unless it's much needed. And also um, configure point in time recovery, and also long term retention, just for all the compliance purposes. Even if your data is lost accidentally, if you have these options enabled, worry about some accidental things. And try not to use like 00050, so that opens your database to the whole internet, so which is hacker's dream. So just try to avoid such things. So I have some references here, where you get a great documentation from Microsoft. And with this, I would like to thank you, the coordinator, and also Deepthi, for giving me this opportunity and allowing me to communicate to a huge audience, and share my knowledge. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Padma. Yeah, I have seen you answering a couple of questions here. Um, yeah, a couple of times we had an intermittent issues with the internet and we couldn't hear
Yeah.
you, but yeah,
Oh, I'm
but
so sorry.
no issues. We were able to connect back to you. So yeah, if anybody have any questions, please do not hesitate to post it. Um, I don't see any more questions coming in. I think you already answered all of the
Guys,
questions.
would say, yeah,
Thank you
I
so
was
much
like
for
going
hanging
through
in
the
there,
questions
everyone.
by looking at the chat. So
Yeah. hmm
uh,
I don't see any more questions coming in, Padma.
okay, if
But thank you so much for being here today
yeah,
and
okay,
yeah,
yeah,
taking your
sure.
time for it, for
Yeah, thank you
speaking.
guys,
And
and I
thank you so
hope.
much, attendees, for. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, guys, and I hope I will have nice day.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.